Hello, folks, and welcome to day 5, our last day of Within Reach's Food Access is Community Care virtual event series. For some of you that are new here, or for folks that have maybe forgotten my name because you've come and gone throughout the past week, my name is Kai Horton. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement Manager here at Within Reach. I've been your host throughout the week, and it has been an absolute honor to be with you all in this space. And I'm very, very excited to host the 2 sessions today. If you're new here and maybe want to know what is Within Reach, I wanted to share a little bit about our organization and our work here. Within Reach builds pathways to make it easier for Washington families and individuals to navigate complex health and social services systems and connect folks with the resources they need to be healthy and safe. In addition to helping people gain access to health insurance and providing information on immunizations and child development, food access is actually one of the many veins of our work. Our direct service team at Within Reach, who you'll meet some of them later today, are the experts in the field of navigating the complex and often inaccessible systems that keep people from getting their basic needs met. We recognize, though, that we're not alone in this work and that there's this vast network of amazing humans doing food access work together, and we wanted to celebrate that. So over the course of this week, you've heard from amazing folks talking about food justice and the future of food and why culturally appropriate food is key to liberation, an anti-colonial approach to food access, and so much more. Our biggest hope for this offering has been to spotlight and center an intersectional lens and approach to what we mean when we say access and what we mean when we say community care when it comes to food. I want to express my deep gratitude to our partners at Safeway for making this series happen, and to the entire team at Within Reach for your unwavering support and commitment to this work every single day. And so today, I have the absolute honor and the privilege to introduce you to an amazing human doing this work alongside us. Her name is Valerie Segrest. Valerie's pronouns are she, her. Valerie is an enrolled member of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe and works as a native nutrition educator and co-founder of Tahoma Peak Solutions, a consulting company that specializes in strategic communications and food systems strategies that serve tribal communities. She has a Bachelor of Science in Human Nutrition and Health Sciences from Bastyr University and a Master's of Arts in Environment and Community. Ms. Segrest has dedicated her work in the field of Native American nutrition towards the efforts of the food sovereignty movement, rooted in education, awareness, and overcoming barriers to accessing traditional foods for tribal communities through North America. Valerie has co-authored several publications, including the books Feeding 7 Generations, a Salish Cookbook, and Indigenous Home Cooking, Menus Inspired by the Ancestors. Valerie aims to inspire and enlighten others about the importance of a nutrient-dense diet through a culturally appropriate, common-sense approach to eating. Valerie, I am so stoked that you're here, and I'm so grateful to be with you today. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And it's so nice to be here with all of you in the virtual world. Thank you for the invite. I always love talking about my favorite subject, which is food and Native people. And when I first started this work, I did not want to be the kind of nutritionist that came back to my community and worked in a clinical setting prescribing a diet that I knew my community members had a hard time accessing, be it policies that prohibit us from harvesting from certain places, or a lack of knowledge of how to get out there and get access to our traditional foods and medicines. That was the reason I was sent to school, requested by my elders, and really wanted to work in community with alongside my other community members, building strategies that were meaningful and healing and helping us reconnect with the land. And so for over a decade, I've been working to do that with not just my tribe, several tribes in the region and across the country. And I'm so honored to be able to help share the the work that we've been doing and why it's so important. I know that there's this big, beautiful food movement happening. It's been going on forever, for a long time, and that for Coast Salish communities, food sovereignty is a real strong movement. It is where we collectively have stood together and said that our foods matter and the health of our people matters. And it's not just tribal leaders that are doing this, it's everybody. It's community members, from our youngest to our eldest. And so today I want to share with you this is like a presentation that helps start with what has happened and why our foods are the remedy, and then what we can do in our everyday life to eat foods and prepare meals that are recognizable by our ancestors, and why we should do that. So I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Come on, technology. Can you see my screen? What am I doing? Yes.
I can, Valerie. Yes, I see it.
Okay. Thanks, Kai. Thanks for saving me. I'm going to maximize that. Okay. So there we go. Here we go. Just joking. Okay, here we go. So I first want to talk about a time of change. And I'm going to go through this kind of briefly because I want to save us some time at the end to chat. And so please feel free to put some questions in the comment box. Kai will help us get to those at the end here. But for 14,000 years, or some say since time began, the Coast Salish ancestors lived a life that, well, for the first form of literacy was reading the landscape for the purposes of eating, living, thriving on the land. And that consisted of several different food systems. In the Puget Sound region, right here, I'm located just south of Seattle. I live right on my reservation, the Muckleshoot Reservation. And we have ecosystems that span, from Whitecap to Whitecap is usually what we'll say, from like the top of Mount Rainier to the shores of the Salish Sea. There are over 200 different types of foods that have been eaten here pre-contact. And that is very different from what Captain Vancouver wrote about when he sailed into the Salish Sea for the first time and wrote in his journal that he had never seen a land so untouched by man before. What he didn't understand is that he was looking at very well-maintained food systems, gardens really. There still are a lot of these things still intact. High mountain huckleberry meadows that were very well managed. Lily bulb prairies that consisted of camas and chocolate lily and balsam root and a plethora of other prairie species that formed a highway that you could walk through from northern Canada into northern California. And those were the camas prairies, which usually you see bloom in and around Mother's Day around the I-5 corridor. That's what we nowadays call it. There are shellfish gardens that were managed. People would make terraced gardens that would make the shores of the Salish Sea really sandy, so it was easy to harvest clams, but those terraced walls would also build habitat for shrimp and krill and other things to be able to grow. There's a kelp highway that connects us to the Arctic and across the ring. And that's all the craze right now. If you just Google kelp highway, there's a bunch of really beautiful videos that have come out on that. Salmon in and of themselves are an ecotype to me. Wetlands, all of these different areas that have provided food that, sort of push against the pervasive idea that whenever man steps into nature, we wreck everything around us. That's the exact opposite for natural resource management. with the Coast Salish ancestors and contemporary Native people in this region. Management is a must in order to maintain the health of all of these ecosystems. And so unfortunately, you know, his journaling of that, what he had seen as wild and untamed land never touched by the hand of man, Captain Vancouver rippled that idea of Mr. McGregor's gardens through time. And so these spaces may not look like that, but they are. Then we have in 1833 the Hudson's Bay Trading Company, which is the first introduction of global trading that happened in the Pacific Northwest region. And during that time, there was this major push. In the 1850s, the Donation Land Claims Act was passed in an effort for the United States to swallow up the Northwest Territory so that they could claim manifest destiny, the idea that it was a God-given right for the pioneers to colonize from east to west coast. And this was because of this, if you could even imagine, you know, just people showing up to areas that you would traditionally be harvesting or usual and traditional custom harvesting grounds, putting a flag in the ground and then suddenly having ownership over an entire ecosystem that your family is, the social fabric is intertwined with inextricably. A violent war over natural resources broke out between Native people and newcomers. In 1855 to 1856, the treaties of the Puget Sound were signed by Governor Isaac Stevens at the time, who then promptly went to go fight in the Civil War. And after that, from 1870 to the 1930s, approximately 8 generations and about 86% of people, Native people, were removed from their homes and taken to boarding schools. And during this time, were fed army rations, which over several generations altered the taste buds of our people with giving preference to refined sugars, poor quality fats, processed flour, and things that actually didn't even exist ever in our diet. In 1924, as the Indian Citizenship Act, we're actually viewed as citizens of this country. And then in the 1930s, the Food Distribution on Indian Reservations, that's what it's called now, but it used to be just called the Commodity Foods Program, was stood up and continued to reinforce the poor quality diet that was superimposed on our community from a very young age for 8 generations. In 1950, we have the first documented case of diabetes in the Pacific Northwest. And this is really important because up until that time, there actually wasn't even a word in any of our indigenous languages for diabetes because it didn't exist. And so this is where I feel inspired to do my work. Diabetes is a symptom of a root problem of people being forcibly removed from their traditional food systems and traumatized for several generations. That's where the healing begins, when we start acknowledging the root cause of the problem and start managing our stress really well for future generations. So in the 1960s, we have the Fish Wars, which is where the local tribes in the area who by treaty right were guaranteed all access to all of the fish in our territories were being made to fish in the dead of night. Secretly, people were arrested, people were beaten up, they were disappeared for just fishing for salmon, something that we have done for 14,000 years plus. And these are archaeological dig sites that now prove that we've been managing fisheries for that long. And then after nearly 2 decades or over a decade, the Bolt decision happened in 1974, where Judge Bolt ruled that he couldn't deny that Native people in the Northwest had been fishing for a very long time and lived a life centered around a cultural keystone species, that of the salmon, and ruled that we had access to half of all of the returning fish. So some think of that as a loss, and some of us think of it as a way to move forward in our world. In 1978, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act was passed, allowing us to practice our religions once again, because up until then, you had to get permission from what we would call farmer in charge, or the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian agents, to be able to celebrate things like Chief Seattle Days over in Suquamish, which happens every year in August. So also part of, in the Northwest, our ceremonial practices were celebrating our foods and food ceremonies, or around potlatches, and people were actually put in jail for potlatching, which essentially means you set the table and you give everything away, because in our culture, we're judged by our generosity. And part of giving away and being generous of all of our material things, or all of the foods that we may have harvested in the year, is part of feeding into a gift economy that helps build social fabric in our community and shows that we have faith in one another and that we rely on each other to live in a free and equitable world. So all of this to now talk about this really fun chart here, because I'm a nutritionist and I have to geek out on the numbers. But the other beef I have with all of this is that the nutrient guidelines for Americans, the standard American diet, does not necessarily reflect what a Coast Salish ancestral diet would. It is not culturally relevant or appropriate, and so our if we were to just look at this, and I only have time to go through one of them. I typically unpack a lot of these for us, but if you were to look at magnesium, for example, and the magnesium intake, according to the nutrient guidelines for Americans, which is the standards that all dietitians and nutritionists and doctors and food boxes are all set off of. All the federal policies rely on this. 360 milligrams a day is adequate. The average current American is intaking about 278 milligrams, which means they're only getting 77% of their current intake. In a Coast Salish diet, the average Coast Salish ancestor would be getting about 700 milligrams, or twice the amount of magnesium, which means that in comparison to the average US current intake, we're getting less than half of the magnesium that we need. And this is important because magnesium deficiency, the symptoms of that show up as the same symptoms of diabetes. Magnesium is actually a really crucial mineral that helps support insulin, combats insulin resistance, and supports the proper cellular function that we need to be able to take on a carb load. Basically, it's really an important nutrient, and this goes for several of them. So just to unpack micronutrients, which I think are really overlooked in our standard American diet, the vitamins are made by plants and animals, and they help us with energy production and immune function. And minerals are derived from soil and water, which help us grow good bones and maintain fluids in the body. And that means that we need healthy plants, healthy animals, healthy soil, and healthy water in order for us to be able to get the amount of minerals and vitamins that we need to be healthy as well. So our health is inextricably intertwined with the health of the land and all of the animals and plants that grow on it. Vitamin C deficiency, which is very pervasive in our communities, is associated with developing diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and certain types of cancers. Already talked about magnesium deficiencies, but the symptoms of fatigue and muscle weakness and seizures, these are the increased risk of diabetes and high blood pressure. These are the top 3 causes of mortality in Indian country: diabetes, heart disease, and certain types of cancers. Calcium deficiency also leads to dental caries and cataract issues. And then zinc deficiency are associated with slow wound healing and impaired taste and fertility issues and increased risk of infections. All of these are, again, very pervasive issues in our tribal communities, but not just here. I feel like it's we're this microscopic view of what's going on really globally. And so the remedy, here's the fun part. If you were to go to the USDA nutrient database and type in foods high in magnesium or calcium or zinc, every single time, the very top result is always a native food, a food that originates from the now called the United States of America, the food that originates from Turtle Island. And so I'm going to go through some of those with you. Huckleberries, for example, which are close cousins to blueberries. So they're relatives. If you were to go to your local supermarket and grab a local blueberry, or even in the frozen section nowadays, I see things called wild blueberries in the frozen section, which are actually huckleberries. They are incredibly high in vitamin C, antioxidants, and fiber. Off the charts. In the Northwest region, right here in the Puget Sound region, there's over 12 different varieties of huckleberries that grow here, from red to blue to purple. There's even tiny little ones that would feed a mouse. They're my favorite. Each one of them has its own flavor profiles. Some are a little bit higher in electrolytes, depending on the season and what we need. They are a cultural pride food. If you go to any local tribal community here, they'll tell you that their huckleberries are the best. So, and I could go on and on and on. I think about chili peppers in the Chili Pepper Nation, and how they're really high in vitamin C and fiber as well, and also capsaicin, which is a phytonutrient that can help ease inflammation in the body. So all these, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, they are all, some of the things that they have in common are not just about nutrient deficiencies, but inflammation in the body. Rose hips, which grow all over the world. Wild rose is one of the oldest plants. I've written a really obnoxious article about it on Yes Magazine, for Yes Magazine, about how this is an indigenous foodway globally. After the wild rose blooms in the summer, its ovary gets pollinated and swells up and creates a rose hip. So there's like some flower sex 101 for you today. But rose hips are incredibly high in vitamin C and iron and have been used to purify blood and ease inflammation in the body and in the body tissues for centuries. They're one of the oldest plants on the planet. There's pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds, also originate from Turtle Island, really high in zinc and magnesium and a lot of micronutrients. And you don't need a whole lot. And they grow here. They're really easy to grow. Maple syrup, which is kind of my new favorite sweetener, is, I think about, it's the immunity of a tree. Like, we're tapping the tree, and tree sap is what carries nutrients up and down the long bodies of the tree. It's sort of like a messenger, but when a tree gets harmed, it shoots the sap to that space and creates a resin to heal it. So it's actually really high in zinc, which is what we also use to build our immune system. So maple syrup is delicious and good for you. Yay! Another native food that is famous for its high zinc levels is oysters, and they are prehistoric. They have been here since Jurassic times. And another really great food that also serves a really intensely important ecological purpose to hold up seawalls and can affect the pH levels of the water, but also depend on the pH levels of water. So we're facing a really fun time here in the Northwest where, people are really worried about if bodies of oysters can form properly anymore because the pH of the Salish Sea is so off. Beans, high in fiber, high in magnesium, high in calcium. The list goes on and on. I can't not talk about salmon because it's, I would be in trouble, but incredibly high in omega-3 fatty acids and proteins and minerals as well. The omega-3 fats are so important for our human nervous systems. Our large brains depend on those fats, and every cell in our body is built off of that omega-3 fatty acid. It can affect your energy levels and even depression. So important, and also really high in vitamin D. If you live in Washington State, you supposedly have vitamin D deficiency, and that's because historically we were eating a lot of cold water fish that had vitamin D levels in it. Chia seeds, yum, another plant-based food that's really high in omega-3 and fiber. This is about to happen any day now. Well, actually, we've got like maybe another month, but I get really excited in the springtime because things are happening. The ends of Doug fir, spruce, and hemlock trees will grow. They shoot this fun little spring growth off the end of it, and those are really high in vitamin C and electrolytes, and they taste so good, just like a little piney orange rind. Squash, another food that's not native to the Northwest, but grows really well here and has that beta carotene, good rooting energy to it, and also really high in fiber. So how can you eat like the ancestors? I get asked this all the time. Nowadays, our traditional harvesting grounds are Safeway and Albertsons and QFC. And what can I do, Val, to eat in a, like bring my ancestors with me in the grocery store? And so here are some tips. Live with the seasons, eat seasonally. Right now we're waking up out of our winter slumber, and I'm seeing a lot of nettles all over the forest floor. And I've got one here to show you when I turn my screen off here in a second. But eating with the seasons helps us stay attuned with what's going on around us. And so this is something we all share. All of human history has never been this far disconnected from the rhythm of our food system. Part of that means in the wintertime here in the Northwest, we would be hibernating, going inside, doing what the plants do. They're not out with their leaves and their flowers in the dead of winter trying to do all the things. They are storing up their energy and fattening up their roots and choosing to spend that energy wisely. And sometimes I feel like we live in this eternal summer because of our modern lives, especially right now where we're just in front of screens and technology all the time and that light is constantly beating on us. It is, you really have to guard your resting time and eat foods that are going to help nourish you and root you into the season. Diversifying your diet. I also think if we are eating seasonally, you're diversifying your diet is sort of like a natural thing that sort of happens, emerges from that. So whatever's seasonally available at the time is going to help you get through that season. And it's also going to help you shift and eat things that are a little bit different. You're eating things when they're at their peak, vitality, and that means that you're going to be getting more minerals and vitamins and nutrients, and trying to eat more than just 20 different foods on an annual basis, which is what the standard American gets. Something all nutritionists can agree on: eating more plants. I think we rely a little bit too much on animal feeding systems, and plants have a role to play in our health and are really wonderful teachers and can help us with healthy weight and prevent chronic diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Traditional foods are whole foods, which means like a blueberry is a blueberry is a blueberry. You don't need a scientific degree to understand what's in your food. I don't know of any like fields of marshmallows or shrubs of Lucky Charms or rivers of diet soda. Those things just don't exist in nature, and your ancestors would have a hard time recognizing them as a food. And gathering wild foods. It's so important to just start a relationship with nature. And a good place to start is by choosing just one food that you want to get to know. If you're out there trying to know all of the things, it gets really overwhelming. And maybe you want to choose to learn more about this one food, and somebody else in your family wants to focus on that food. And now you guys both collectively have so much more wisdom than one person alone could possibly have. and you need each other to know what that that wisdom is about. And that is part of our food system that I think we really need to lean back into, is how much we our humans rely on each other, that's okay, that we don't have to be out there doing it alone. Cooking and eating with good intention. This is something that happens constantly in tribal communities. If cooking is, it's a holy experience. It's, what do I want to say? It's if somebody doesn't feel good, if they're a stranger in your home, you offer them food. That's what helps them to feel better. And so the process of harvesting, preparing, and serving food to someone should be held with good intention, because you want them to feel that way when they're eating the food. But we should also be eating with good intention. And that means, like, in our busy lives nowadays, we're eating from one thing to the next, or maybe not giving our parasympathetic, our rest and digest section of our nervous system the time to shine, because we're constantly running on survivor mode. It is eating is a human experience, and it's a humbling experience. It's a reminder that we're human, and we rely on our world around us to feed us and help us grow and maintain our health. And that's what eating is really all about. So spending some time really eating with good intention is part of a traditional foods diet. And then the last one is giving back to the land. It's really easy to go out there and harvest foods, and maybe you find a forest patch that becomes your garden and your area to maintain. But you can also grow a lot of these foods. So not only is this about composting and making sure that you're not leaving a large footprint, or whatever they want to call it nowadays, but also investing in the time to grow and cultivate something helps to give back to the land. As humans, we are, I think, trained to feel separate from it. We learn that way. It's part of our education system. It's observation, observing ecosystems and environments, but not necessarily the human impact that's a positive impact. And we all have the ability to make really positive impacts on the land by being active in it and honoring nature, cherishing nature for what she has to provide. So I have 10 minutes for some questions. I am going to try to stop showing my screen. Yay, it worked. Can you see me? I can't hear you.
I can also still see your screen, which is beautiful. But I don't know if that's what you want. There we go. Okay. Okay. Valerie, can I just start by saying that your energy is like infectious? I literally felt like I was just like hanging out with you. We were in the field and you were just showing me all these plants, and you made me so hungry and so excited to like start going back out into nature. I think, you named like hibernation, and like, wow, like the winter really does like bring out this like reclusive, like hermited feeling. And sometimes that means that, people don't go outside even once a day, and just like, that's not really what nature's asking for, right? Like I think there's a middle ground to be struck there. And yeah, thank you. Like I feel so excited by everything that you shared.
Yeah, I'm really into this whole seasonal teachings right now. I think it's important because we really are, like, our society, and especially the last 2 years, we're just really set up to be in this eternal summer. And that means that you're just burning through all your energy and not giving yourself the proper time to rest and dream and vision what you want to do in the next year. It's really disruptive.
Yes.
And we deserve a break. It's totally okay. So yeah,
I love that. Would you like some questions in the question function that's coming through? Okay. This first one's from our dear Angelica, who you might have seen CC'd on some of those emails. She was the mastermind behind a lot of things. So Angelica asks, are there ways folks can support, i.e. monetary, volunteering, etc., Indigenous communities in doing this work?
Oh man, It's a tricky question, because part of the healing process for us is doing the work. And so for, I would say the easiest, and maybe I don't want to be too new agey here, but like holding space for Native people to continue to be a part of this, to be seen in these areas. And that may not be how everybody feels about it, but I know a lot of people who think the remedy to colonization is visibility, because invisibility is the perpetuation of it. And at the same time, we're still healing from a long period of needing to be secret and hold on to our knowledge, because it hasn't always been a safe place for us to practice who we are. And so some people show up in those spaces with a real fire in their gut to do it, and some people are still hesitant, and that's okay, and warranted. So yeah, I think just being aware, being a good ally, and holding space is important. It's also like the reason why I just came from the world of philanthropy is to dig in on how less than 1% of all philanthropic dollars actually come to Native communities to support this food systems work. And Native people are hardwired to be the answer for a lot of the problems. When you make an investment in Native people who are doing the work in food systems, it is going to pay off 10 times, because we don't know how to do anything else. What we were put here to do. And I feel like that should just be the answer to all grant applications. But you've got to like,
that should be enough. Yeah.
Blood form on your forehead to explain why it is you're doing what you're doing. So then there's that.
I love everything you just said. One thing really stuck out to me is like practice who we are. Like this idea of like being embodied in these like ancestral lineages, being a present form in this form, understanding that like time is non-linear, like the practice of being oneself and being engaged with one's culture and people is like, there needs to be space for that practice. So yeah, I just really want to like echo that. That's a really beautiful way to reframe being a human in this world. That is a constant practice. Yeah. There's other questions here. There's one from Jennifer that says, do you have any resources or tools that we could use to know what food is in season?
Oh, so we have a couple of little booklets. Feeding 7 Generations is a Coast Salish cookbook that we put together that's organized by the seasons, and then we also just launched a podcast, but it's our first episode went up on Wednesday, so we're going to revamp it because we want to put more food stuff in there. Right now we're just talking about seasons and the social emotional piece of the season, so that's why I'm talking about it so much. But just so you know, right now this is happening, which I was supposed to do today, but I have a severely sprained ankle. Kai knows all of my drama, sorry. but I had to go to the ER this week and I can't stand. My foot is swollen, but I had my little girls harvest this for me to show you last night. And these are fresh spring green nettles that are happening on the forest floor. It's the first green. And this to me signifies like, wake up, get out of that winter slumber, build your strength, because that's what nettles do. They're incredibly high in magnesium, iron, calcium, phosphorus, all the things our body uses to build and manufacture blood. And then they also have an affinity to the liver and the kidneys, so they help us sort of gently detox. They stimulate our epithelial system. I could tell you all of the things, but it's basically like how plants are like building and regenerating and using all that like sort of force to push through the cold blanket of the soil to reach to the sun. That's what they're explaining for us to do right now, to just sort of get up and build your strength so that you can manifest all of the visions and dreams that you've been, dreaming up for yourself during your winter slumber. So wild spring greens. And that's what the Yes Magazine article is about that just came out today as well.
Valerie, will you email me the links to all of your amazing things so I can make sure I send this out to the participants in the community as well?
Yeah, I totally can do that.
Cool. Here's another question. It says, thank you so much, Valerie, which yes. For those of us who do not presently have a strong connection or understanding of the land we live on, what are some tips you can offer for how we can begin to grow that relationship?
Yeah, I think it can be really overwhelming at first, especially if I'm assuming everybody here is in Washington State, right? Or maybe not.
I think mostly, yeah, mostly.
I've had a lot of friends who have moved here from the Southwest who've felt really overwhelmed by the amount of trees and green that are on the landscape, which I totally understand. And when you're trying to start, learning anything new, my practice is to spend time, like see what is sort of calling to you. Every day I try to get outside and go for a walk for 20 minutes, rain or shine, I don't care. I just need to be outside breathing air. And something along the way always gets me, like hazelnut or willow is flowering right now, or just let that capture you and then surrender to all of the wonderful knowledge. You could spend a whole lifetime studying one plant. Mine is obviously nettles, but and it will take you so far. It will take you to so many places. So what we often tell people is that your greatest teachers are waiting for you right outside the door. And they don't teach like how I am today, where I'm telling you what I know about things or how we're used to learning. They teach without a spoken word. And that means that it kind of is asking for the gravity of your presence to really pay attention and observe how it's growing and what that means. So a great example for me is salmon, for example, who live this like wonderful life. They're born in these ancestral rivers. They journey to the ocean waters. They're out there on some odyssey, building their bodies and their strength over time. And after a few years, they return to those ancestral rivers, and they're fighting against the current. They are, getting through the commercial fisheries and the tribal fisheries to come back to these rivers and give their life knowingly. They're going up the river to spawn and die, to feed the next generation and all the things on the land. And so as Coast Salish people, we see that and we ask ourselves how we too might live a life that is so abundant and so loving and so generous. And in so many ways, that's what makes us want to be land advocates and water advocates, because we see our foods, which are more than just commodities and resources. They're our greatest teachers, really animating for us what it looks like to be in a culture of health that is so giving and so generous. And so how can you spend time in nature with holding that kind of intention of how can I be like a dandelion, and no matter what anybody tries to do to you, you still come back and you still are big medicine. So
okay, I would really love to go on a walk with you sometime. It would be an absolute honor. The amount of wonder and awe and curiosity that's stirring in my heart as you speak is invaluable gifts. And I know that I'm not alone. The chat function is blowing up with so much gratitude and love and awe for your presence, your energy, everything you shared today, Valerie. And thank you so much for being here. I think what I can do is, if anybody has extra questions for Valerie from within reach, you know how to reach me, and I will find out the answer for you. And for folks that are not within reach and would like to, stay connected, and if more questions stir in you, as I'm sure that they will, feel free to reach out to info@withinreachwa, so WA.org. That WA is very important. I feel like a lot of people miss that. And just send some questions, and I'm sure we can find a way. We'll also send you all the amazing things that Valerie's involved in right now, because there's a lot of ways to support her and hold space for her and continue to engage with her work. And yeah, just Valerie, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you and have learned so much today.
Well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me and making it such a kind space. I really appreciate that. And for all of you out there who are doing this work and showing up to this as well, like answering the call, that's so cool. And I hope that you find ways to take care of yourself. We all need to just do that better these days.
Yes. And for our amazing attendees that are here, we're going to take a little bio break. We're going to take 15 minutes, and then we have a closing session with some of our Within Reach team. We're going to do a little bit of a live panel Q&A. So please come back. I'm going to end this session, and then you just will be put into the waiting room, and you'll see another join the session right at 1 p.m. And we'll pick up another amazing conversation to close out this series. So thank you, Valerie, again. Really appreciate you. Wishing you a really restful and beautiful weekend. I think the sun's gonna come out, so that's really exciting. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Talk soon. Bye.